From the front lines of the military to the front lines of business, this is Military to Management. I'm your host, Eamon. Each episode, we uncover how veterans are translating discipline, leadership, and mission-first values into success in today's corporate world. Hey, Tyler. Welcome to the Military to Management podcast. Super pumped to have you on today. Your background in the Marines and your startup story at Kognitiv Edge is super motivating, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot from you, especially some folks who are getting out of the military and are looking to make that big jump into civilian life. So first and foremost, like I said, you have an amazing background in the Marines. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your time in the Marines, how long you're in, what you were doing, any key highlights you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, most definitely. Hey, first off, thank you so much for thinking of me and having me on. And excited to share my story, and hopefully someone sees some similarities or some differences that help them on their journey. So I'll get into your first question. So Tyler Van Hook, I was born and raised in Northern Virginia, about 45 minutes outside of DC. I distinctly remember as a young kid being told by my dad when I saw young lieutenants that were going through the Marine Corps Officer Candidate School lost near my house. He would be like, "That individual is lost, son." So I remember that. Played a lot of sports growing up. I got two brothers. We were all pretty athletic, highly competitive. I quickly learned that they were way better at sports than I was, and my college or professional career was probably going to be short-sighted. So kind of did a lot of thinking, and I ended up running into a Marine recruiter. Oddly enough, his name was Sergeant Soul, and he had just gotten back from Fallujah, Iraq. This is early 2000 time period, and he basically said, I don't think you have what it takes into a young individual that's competitive. I think that was the nudge I needed. So I needed to show up at these PT events that they ran at the recruiting center in order to prove that I could, run. The things the Marine Corps loves, right? Run, do pull-ups and sit-ups, right? So I was able to prove that I could hang, and then I was offered the opportunity to join the Marine Corps. I was actually relatively young at the time, so I had to get waivers from both my mom and dad in order to go in early. So I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old, went East Coast, so I went to Parris Island, and then fell in love with the Marine Corps. I probably needed structure at that point in time in my life, and the Marine Corps will most definitely provide you that. And so it did. Weirdly enough, after boot camp, they were training at School of Infantry East. They were like training the Navy or something like that. So I got to go to Camp Pendleton for SOI West. It was just like a unique situation. So I got to go out to the School of Infantry West. While being out there, I think it was like within like the first 20 training days for the 0311, the reconnaissance cadre came out and they ran, the screener indoc for Marine Recon. I didn't even know what Marine Recon was until they were like, "Can you run fast? Can you do pull-ups? And can you swim?" I said yes to all the above, and I was told to show up early before our training started for SOI, and I was going to partake in the recon screener. After successfully passing that with some buddies that I had made in my platoon, my orders were changed to 0311 to 0321, and then I stayed West Coast at that point in time and went to pre-BRC and then ultimately BRC, which is the basic reconnaissance course, which is super cool because you do training at Pendleton and Coronado, right next to where the Navy SEALs run BUDS. So I was young, ready to rock and roll. I could follow directions good. So I actually ended up doing well at the basic reconnaissance course, and then became a recon Marine. Shortly thereafter, basically there's three places you can go. First recon out at Camp Pendleton, second recon at Camp Lejeune, or third recon in Okinawa, Japan. And they said, hey, everybody has to go to 3rd Recon at some point in time in their career. So a mentor told me, hey, you need to go out there. And he was from 3rd. So, of course, he said the best recon Marines are from 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. So I got the fortunate opportunity to go out to 3rd Recon in Okinawa, Japan, did a few deployments with Marine Recon. Then shortly thereafter, there were some talks at Special Operations Command and Congress about letting the Marines be a part of SOCOM. And they had already been kind of working this pilot called the DET, and then they were going to formalize it. And to do that, the initial step was to take kind of certain ranks from Marine Reconnaissance and build out what is now known today as MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. So I got to come over. I was just happy to get back to the States, to be quite honest. So I got to come over to Camp Lejeune, and it was called 2nd MSOP at the time, Marine Special Operations Battalion. And we built out what is now known today as MARSOC, and the incredible work that team and community continues to do over there. So I spent the later half of my career at Marine Special Operations Command.
That's amazing, man. So going from Marine Recon to building out MARSOC, which is like every Marine's, fantasy to get into, absolutely incredible. I'm sure you learned a ton of different things while you were throughout your deployments, through the building of, an elite organization. What are, what are some of your leadership takeaways that you still carry with you from your time in the Marines?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think reflecting on it is we have a natural tendency, right, as humans to solve problems the same way we've seen them solved in the past, right? So when we were going from Recon to Marine Special Operations Command, there's a lot of similarities between, the work of a reconnaissance Marine and the work of a critical skills operator or a Marine Raider. So we initially out of the gate tackled a lot of the same requirements with the same mindset of a recon Marine. And I think that was great, but also there was a lot of differences too. And I think being adaptable is key, right? Like you have experiences, right? Like you have to earn experience or you have to buy it, right? And so with experience, take what you have, the tools, frameworks, what worked, what didn't work, and use that as a respiratory to make sound decisions. But once you get going on that decision, have the flexibility to built in to adapt to maybe emerging requirements or changes over of the overall desired end state. So just kind of getting an initial plan, executing that initial plan, and then having the ability to adapt off of it.
Super important advice. Adapting is, key, both in the military and on the civilian side. So obviously we talked about it, previously, but tell us a little bit about your transition out of the Marine Corps. You definitely did some adapting there, but tell us, what was it like transitioning? What were some of the challenges? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, adapting. I would say I'm still adapting. You spend so much time with certain personnel and certain organizations, right? Like it's ingrained in you. Yeah. So later on in my career, I had to make a decision on, whether I continue to serve or retire out of the military, right? And at that point in time, just where I was personally and then where I was with my family, we made the decision to retire out of the military. Probably, by and large, one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and probably will ever have to make. Serving the country is I don't know if there's anything that's equivalent to that, right? And so it was like, well, what's next? Like, right? Like, what if that was chapter 1? What does chapter 2 look like, right? And luckily, our predecessors have learned so much about transition and the difficulties. They've really started that feedback loop back to the Department of Defense on ways that we can improve transitioning for, people do 4 years, 8 years, or retire. Like it's all the same, right? You're leaving a high performing team and military standards to go do something else. And that's going to require change, and that's going to require adaptability. So fortunately for me, when I was retiring, right? There was a lot of things like, hey, here are roadblocks. Here's things, here's challenge areas, and you need to be you need to be cognizant about these areas. And so knowing that ahead of time, I think was huge, right? Like it was mission analysis. Like I knew I needed to transition out of the military, and I knew here was enemy's most likely course of action and enemy's most dangerous course of action, right? So that was huge. The other thing is like some of these programs that have been brought back to the military, I was super blessed, and here's why. So I don't remember people, senior to me, like having transition programs. So the first thing is for the Marine Corps wide, you've got the ability to do a SkillBridge. And then if you're with Special Operations Command, they've mimicked that, and they have something called the SOCOM Fellowship. So knowing that, it's basically like a trial run for Chapter 2. Like there's so many options. What are you going to do? Like go try it. So I was fortunate and to use the SOCOM Fellowship, which allowed me to go work at intern with a company and learned what it was like to work at that company. I decided to work with a friend of mine who built an amazing roofing company. And I was inspecting people's roofs, both for if they wanted a new roof or if, damages, because most bases are by the coast. So for insurance claims. And I quickly found out what a job was in the first time in my adult life. I think the military is a job, right? It's more so a duty, right? Like you want to be there, you want to do those things. This was like show up to work, inspect roofs, and capture the information to be tailored to whether they need a new roof and why or why not. So that was the first like wake up call for me. During that time, right about as I was figuring that out, a few friends of mine had told me about these additional transition programs. I only know a few of them. I know there's a ton of really great ones out there, but I know there's like Bunker Labs, 4Block, and then the Honor Foundation. Just because of my network, I had more information on the Honor Foundation, so I elected to do that. So I went to the Honor Foundation. Absolutely incredible. Don't quote me on this. I think it was like anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, but basically they bring in people that have transitioned and retired. They tell their stories, and then you learn about things that maybe you had heard about, but you really didn't know. Not your basic individual record or your basic training record, but this is called a resume, right? Or a CV. And here's what's important about those things and how to transition those things from what you did in the military to what's applicable in the commercial space. Other things, LinkedIn. Had heard about LinkedIn, never used LinkedIn, never was a part of it. It's an incredibly powerful tool. They bring in experts and tell you how to build your LinkedIn profile. And then the last one, there's a ton of great things that I learned in there, but one of the last ones that I learned was like the mock interviews, right? We'd all done one-on-ones, initial counselings, quarterly reviews, all the military-centric ones, right? We had done those. Job interviews are different. You need to know about the company. You need to be able to promote yourself. So being able to do mock interviews with people from the financial industry, Amazon, Microsoft, I mean, the people that they bring in to run these mock interviews is absolutely incredible. And that experience and exposure to that, what I think was highly beneficial.
That's amazing. So you just plugged like a bunch of different resources, which it's amazing. You went into the roofing, company. Maybe that wasn't something you decided you didn't want to do for the rest of your life when you got out. So tell us a little bit about your current role and how you got there. Tell us a little bit about that because it's super interesting.
Yeah, and I want to take a step back on the roofing job. I learned so much in that. It was an amazing opportunity, but I think one thing we need to remember as service members when we transition out is timing, right? Like you're literally changing from not being in a uniform and shaving every day to like, this is a new place of duty. And I think a lot of what transpired during my fellowship with the roofing company was like learning those things, right? And the different people that you'll interact with. So like the amount of learning that ensued was like absolutely incredible. And I'm glad that I had the option to say, this is not a decision I have to make for the rest of my life. So that was huge. And that's kind of what transpired me to like look a little bit more. So I was like, okay, that was like pretty incredible. That was like pretty fulfilling work, right? Like I was literally putting roofs on people's heads, and I was literally like saying, I know your insurance policy better than you do because it's my job. And here is whether it qualifies or not. And if it doesn't qualify, here's what you can do. Or if it does qualify, here's the steps to do it, right? That's pretty meaningful work, right? But I think I started to learn that I wanted to be challenged in different aspects, and that I started to come to the realization that I was never going to be able to match the sense of pride and fulfillment of duty by serving. So I was like, is there a way that I can mimic that, right? And I know like all of us say we get out and we're not going to become defense contractors or consultants, and then majority of us end up coming back and doing it, right? Because you want to be next to the crew, you want to be a part of the mission, and you continue want to play a role in that. So I started to lean towards that path. And when I was leaning towards that consulting role, I found out that there was a need in the government that I'd actually gotten pretty smart on. And it's basically I think in the United States military, we know how to train and educate people better than anybody in the world. We've been doing it for a long period of time. Service members take a lot of pride and ownership in the transfer of knowledge to subordinates people. It's like literally in our ethos, right? So we know how to train people really well, but we kind of use some of these archaic ideologies and methodologies at time, because our training is adjusting for what's needed for the warfighter, right? How do we best prepare the warfighter to do their job, right? His or her job. Well, technology is not worried about that. So technology is continuing to grow, and it's like you're always trying to catch it. So I found as I was leaving MARSOC, by integrating some of our practices with the use of technology, we were able to automate a lot of low value add tasks and start making kind of data driven decisions on training that we were doing and how effective that training was. So when I went down the consulting route, I'd seen that the problem still existed, right? We know how to train everybody extremely well. However, we spend a lot of time on the tedium, administrative tasks, building rosters, rebuilding schedules, collecting information, using Excel and pivot tables to display that information that we collected, to put that in a PowerPoint slide deck. When I had gotten exposed to some of the technology and tools that I had seen in the commercial space, I was like, this could really remove manual tasks, automate those workflows, so service members could spend more time on knowledge transfer and the things that matter, opposed to some of these things that are just massive time consumers, so to speak. So I got asked to look at a unique problem set within a training education command, and they asked me, I made a proposal on what I would build and how I would build it, leveraging tech. No idea what I was doing. I just had seen what other people had done and what people had done in the commercial space, and kind of put something together with my wife, Colleen, and it hit. They were like, this is one of the best products we had seen. And this was a duct tape prototype, right? Like, meaning Tyler could click the buttons to make them work. They also in tech call that the happy path. But I knew what buttons to click to make the numbers work. But the whole point of it was a prototype to prove out that this is what ideally would work. And after further evaluation, they were like, hey, we're extremely interested in this. Would you build this? Well, us as service members, we never sign up for a job we don't know how to do, right? Under promise, over deliver, right? That's kind of the core of our being. So I've never written a line of code in my life. I don't know much about technology. I think I'm more advanced than some of my peer group on tech, but I'm sure not the best. And so my wife at the time had a great career in the technology sector with companies like Gartner, and then a data analytics startup. And so she had taught me some of these things. And when we looked at the problem set, we verified that it was across the DoD, which it was. And we came to the conclusion, right? Technology is used in wars and people win wars. right? And we don't need less technology. We're always going to need better people, right? Like every day, I'm trying to be better in some capacity. So we founded a company called Kognitiv Edge with a K, and our whole current objective is strictly focused on human capital and how do we make people better. And we've specifically targeted inside the Department of Defense training and education pipelines with our flagship product, the Hyper-Enabled Instructor.
That's amazing. Kognitiv Edge, super cool. The story and the journey that you went on to found it, also super interesting and amazing, quite frankly. I'm sure the DoD is trying to do a lot of things to improve, especially, given the current climate in the world. Do you see, what's what's a typical day in the life like for you currently? And are there any big trends you're seeing, for Kognitiv Edge or your industry, overall? I know that's kind of a two-part question, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, you're asking me questions that I ask myself every day. So I'll give you the best answer I can. So, building a company is hard. It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. There's so many different variables. You truly have to be a student of the game. Very similar to training exercises or overseas deployments, right? The enemy has a vote. The battlefield's always changing, right? The same is true with a startup. You first got to define what that startup is, right? And you got to tie culture to that, and you got to continually build and prune that culture. We were very fortunate in doing that. And one thing I'll just take a step back with Kognitiv Edge is we're really good at solving problems as service members, right? And I looked at the problem as both as the one I was trying to solve for the DoD, as well as what are the impediments or problems Tyler has to get there, right? And think about it, the majority of my career, based off the units that I had the fortunate opportunity to work with, my life revolved around shoot, move, communicate, medicate, right? So as long as I was able to do those skills at a high level and hold other people to that level and train other people to get to that level, my job in theory was satisfied, right? That's not what I haven't seen that in a job description yet in my startup, right? There's job descriptions that have that in there, but at Kognitiv Edge, it doesn't. So my objective was, if I know how to shoot, move, communicate, medicate, and now I have to build a startup that's the vehicle to solve the problem you've asked me to solve, what's the fastest way to get to 2 points, right? So I used the veteran programs that are available to us, the GI Bill, in order to go to Brown University for my master's. It was in technology, and it was probably one of the best decisions I made. And here's why. A lot of training had incurred and a lot of mentorship incurred for me to get to the level in which I was operating with when I departed the military. The same is true in the commercial space. So I thought, if I was able to get in a room with some of the most talented individuals in the world, learn how they think, understand why they think the way they think, learn how they solve problems, and what's their calculus on solving that problem. If I was able to put myself in that position, I knew I could learn. So by going into Brown, I was able to get surrounded with people from Amazon, Google, Workday. I mean, every company, Palantir, every company you can think of in the tech space, someone was there. So that was basically allowing me to drink through the fire hose, as we like to say in the military, to understand how to make decisions, business-centric decisions, and why. And that really set the foundation for Kognitiv Edge. And then once we started the company, right, there's a couple things, right? A startup, the reason why a startup is successful, it's very similar to a rifle team or a rifle platoon or a recon team or a Marine Special Operations team. It's a collective of diverse individuals that are all dedicated to the mission. So you have to create that collective. And once you create that collective, barring anything of relatively high significance, you have to row until you meet the desired end state. And there's going to be waves that come at you. There's going to be blockers that come at you, and you're going to have to quickly understand what that blocker is and see if you can go through it, go over it, or go around it. And that's a day in a life in a startup. Speaking to industry trends, right? It was super fascinating. Kognitiv Edge got started in 2023. I don't think I'd heard inside the military. I'd started hearing about use of data. And if you think about it, like the commercial space is usually a couple years ahead of where the defense space is in certain technology metrics, right? So data was becoming a real thing as I got out of the military. So I was pretty understanding of that, right? But also what happened in 2023, right? Generative AI was starting, we were past early adoption. People were really starting to understand it, right? So the technology landscape was changing, right? Then what happened? Venture capitalists, VCs that had kind of avoided the government sector due to kind of the way contractual agreements are made, pricing, pay cycles, a lot of different reasons they hadn't kind of looked at portfolio companies to focus in the defense space. We're now all in, especially with companies like Anduril, right? Palantir was kind of like the first of the first. Well, now that was super prevalent, right? So now you kind of had market saturation, right? There was a ton of commercial talent that was now had a vested interest in the government, which I think everybody always wanted to help the government in some way, shape, or form, but now it wasn't on their limelight. And I think events like what happened in Ukraine and what happened in Gaza really put that at the forefront of a lot of these incredible technologists' brain. So they were like, if I have this skill set to help solve these problems that the government is trying to solve that will better society and humanity at large, I'm in. So now you had an influx of people all trying to work on these problems in the government. So I think when I was kind of part of this ride from 2023 to now about this influx of commercial talent ponying up to support requirements needed for the betterment of national security.
That's amazing, and really great for anybody getting out of the military who wants to go into tech, but not like the typical tech, more defense-focused tech. It sounds like there's a ton of options. Obviously, Palantir, Anduril, big names, Kognitiv Edge. I'm sure you'll have opportunities there too as you guys continue to grow. So it sounds like the defense tech space is on the rise. Have you felt that at Kognitiv Edge? Has it just kind of carried you up, or have you found like is your section of it like a niche that not many other companies are doing right now?
Yeah, that's a super interesting challenge. Because if you think about like the beginning of government contracting, right, it was a lot of commercial companies. And then in World War I and World War II, they were able to change course in order to support the United States, right, or our partners and allies. Look at it. We watched this during COVID. Did we not have breweries, innovative Americans figuring out, one of the best things, people were talking about masks, but people were also talking about hand sanitizer. There's a shortage of hand sanitizers, and those breweries were able to pivot to satisfy that need for the world, right? The same is true now in the tech space, probably more important than ever, right? So the government needs niche technology, right? But really, when you distill it down, only in like a certain area. So like, let's talk lasers, right? Like, what's the commercial use case for lasers? Probably pretty limited. I'm thinking pest control and a couple other industries, but not as much as maybe the development efforts are required on the defense space. But other things, right? Like learning management systems, talent management systems, automating low value add processes. Like this stuff has been done, right? So finding kind of the coin term right now is dual use technology, right? So one of like the most important things at Kognitiv Edge is understanding, is this a problem in the government? Check. Now, is it a problem? Like, let's just say, is this a problem at organization X? All right. Is it also a problem at organization Y and Z? So we want to know that that problem is just not unique to that stakeholder group or that organization, that it's actually prevalent across multiple paths. And another way to look at it is like, is this a problem in the air wing and maneuver, our ground forces and the Navy? Like, you can look at it that through that lens too. So once we verify that, the next step is, where is this done in the commercial space? And is this a problem in the commercial space? And if you look hard enough and you do enough investigative research, you'll find that dual use. And if you have dual use, it's incredibly important, right? Because not only that, you can solve problems from a business perspective in two different markets, but you can also be able to get your costs down low due to the fact that you have a wider portfolio of customers, right? So the objective for us is making sure that we're solving problems that are not only important to the defense sector, but are also prevalent in the commercial space as well.
Love it. Super smart. You can't just go after one customer. If you can apply your IP and your tech to multiple different customers, makes a lot of sense to me. I always ask one question: what are, like, for you personally, what are some like the key metrics and KPIs? And for those of you who don't know, KPIs are key performance indicators that you are measuring and are trying to improve for Kognitiv Edge?
Yeah, there's a variety of ways that you can look at key performance and indicators, KPIs. First and foremost, customer centric. Is the customer using our product or happy with our service, right? We're on the product side of the house, right? So the customer is actively using the product. What's the feedback of that the customer saying about that product? What's the feedback loop from the time the customer identifies a problem with the product to the time code is written to rectify the said name problem or issue, right? In a startup, I think everything is a distraction except for the customer, right? So we try to remove all the noise, right, and focus on the signal. And we got to get the product into the wild. We got to get customer feedback. We got to iterate on that customer feedback, right? And there's a couple lenses that you can look at that through, right? Like Steve Jobs is famously quoted as saying, if the customers knew what they wanted, I wouldn't have a job. Or what market research did you do for the iPad? And he said 0, right? Or Henry Ford famously quoting, you can have anything you want as long as the car is black, right? So there's this fine balance, right? Because you only have a finite amount of resources, and it's incredibly important that you optimize and sequence the way those resources are leveraged and utilized, right? So getting that feedback loop extremely tight, understanding what problem is it actually solving, and being able to pick and choose the ones you iterate on as fast as humanly possible. I think where the government is going with tech, we're starting to see from these long, drawn out, massive modernization efforts to these short, tight, rapid, people use the word agile practices. Or bottom line is, how fast can I get an engineer right next to a warfighter? And can that engineer have the ability to take business requirements and translate those into technical requirements? Hack a solution together to immediately solve that warfighter's problems. In addition, translate those requirements back to our tech hub, which is in Minneapolis, to have the big machine start putting that at more enterprise level code. So based off that feedback you're getting on the ground, it's getting iterated into the actual development and scalability of the solution, and just continue to do that step by step by step. That has been our full and entire focus. Also ensuring you understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. Once you've built a team, the team's 12 strong now. And you get the fortunate opportunity to work with incredibly talented individuals. you can do a lot of things. But if you can do a lot of things, you may not do all of those things well. So out of those a lot of things, what are the true pain points to the customer, and what are the 2 to 3 things that we could focus on and over deliver on?
Amazing. Customer centric, like give the customer what they want as quickly as possible. Customer satisfaction. Sounds like you've got that figured out and you've got that loop figured out. My next question would be, for you personally and for your company, where do you want to see yourself in 6-12 months from now?
6 to 12 months. So you talked about customer centric, right? And it's easy to say that, but doing it is a different thing, right? And it takes a lot of hard work. The next thing is processes, right? Why in the military were we so good? Rifle platoon 1 could link up with rifle platoon 2 and be pretty effective, right? They were effective because we had these things called standard operating procedures and tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? SOPs and TTPs. The same exact is true, right? So I talked about that feedback loop from customer to development team, right? The processes have to be built. And then once you get the process, how do you optimize it, right? In a startup, very true for a recon team or a MARSOC team. Speed is your security, right? I remember hearing that 100 times, right? Same is true for a startup. Speed is your security, right? So how can we accurately and as fast as humanly possible document requirements, get those back to the development team, get a prototype to the end user, get feedback, put that feedback into that prototype and have it tested again. The faster we can cut down on the feedback loop and iteration cycles, we're better. But that works with your current team, right? How do you scale that? You scale that through SOPs and TTPs, right? So getting that process documented, vetted, choke points identified. So you're always optimizing, but you're always documenting, right? So that way, when it comes time to adding additional customer, you're able to scale effectively while maintaining effectiveness.
Love it. So I'm hearing, next couple months, you're building out your internal processes so you can just pour jet fuel and scale, and meet your customers' demand. I guess what are there any big roadblocks that you see right now? Like if you could pick one big roadblock that you have and magically remove it, what would it be?
One big roadblock I could magically remove. Right now, I'm going to say time. I would not remove anything that I'm going through right now because I am learning so much every day. There's challenges and problems, but I don't think these challenges or problems are just for today. I think those challenges and problems will be relevant tomorrow, or if we switch projects, they'll be there. And I think being a constant student of the game and learning okay, that worked here, but it doesn't work here. Well, why doesn't it work here? All right, well, next time, do we still do the same thing and anticipate it not working, or do we change up our process? Right now, as painful as it says to say that to you, right now, I've never heard anybody talk about achieving, greatness without hard times. And I think these hard times are what's making me and personally the company. And I think living in the moment of those, especially with the craziness going out in tech, right? OpenAI dropping models. Every time I check X, they're doing something else, or a new startup has figured out a way to do this, or Musk is released on Grok. I mean, it's moving so fast, right? And it's just all right, here's where we're at. Here's where we need to get. There's no shortcut. There is no, if there's a shortcut, I promise you, in my perspective, there's a lot more smarter people than me that would have figured that shortcut out. And it's going to be done through grit and hard work. And we've got to continuously learn. And once we learn something, we've got to inject that feedback into our cycle. And right now, if I could raise my magic wand, it would be more time to live in the current moment, to understand what I'm doing now, the cause and effect of that, what can I go back and change, and how can ultimately I become a better critical skills operator. My engineer can become a better engineer. My forward deployed engineer's a better forward deployed engineer. We just brought on an ops lead who was former MARSOC and worked at State. I'm already learning from onboarding. I've made the process way better for him, but there's still a ton of room for improvement. So just one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, make everything better day by day, right?
Love that answer. That was such a good answer, Marine answer. Love it. So I gotta ask, amazing story, amazing company. Just to loop back, how do you think your military service prepared you, or like specific principles or habits that's prepared you specifically to thrive in your current environment? You definitely like laced it throughout the entire chat here, but if you could distill it down to like a couple words or like a couple phrases, like what did the military do to prepare you to be the man you are right now?
I think kind of number one is goal setting. When you've served this nation in any of our military branches, I'm a firm believer that you have worked with and operated with some of the finest and best men and women to walk this earth. That alone sets a standard for what individuals are capable of. I specifically remember being on several teams as a Marine, as a Recon Marine, as a MARSOC Raider, and doing anything with nothing, right? Like I specifically remember solving massive problems with nothing, just a collective of human beings willing to put in the work. When that's ingrained in your ethos, I think anything is truly possible. The second thing, right? The counteract to that. The biggest thing that I've learned at operating at that tempo, right? And you transition out, you have incredible experience. And a lot of it is beneficial in numerous different ways and manners, right? I remember people telling me that they went to Ranger School and that they didn't realize the benefit of Ranger School until 5 years later, because it was like Marines. So they went and then they didn't go to a Ranger bat. They went back to the Marine Corps, but they would like say like, I'm now using the things I was taught in Ranger School 5 to 10 years later, right? That is true from your military service. Also, is true is your adaptability, right? You've been in low stress, you've been in high stress, you've been in the in-between, right? So be able to be buoyant within those tides, right? And with that being said, is like one of the biggest things I think I learned coming over to the commercial space was that it's easier to lead in this capacity. Here's why. In the military, right, whether you have an intel, a logo, an ammo tech, a geo-enter, right, any of these people get attached to you, right? What were they before all of that? They were a Marine, right? Or they were a sailor, right? That's culture that's embedded that you're inheriting. When you get into the commercial space, you're going to be inheriting a mixture of cultures. Here's a premier example. And my team alone, right? Just 12 people. I've got people from Gartner, Google, IBM, JP Morgan, Medtronic, Thomson & Reuters, consulting firms, energy sector, other startup experience. And we're a 12-person company. All of those things come with their own cultures. And how do you sift through that mix and take the best to define your own culture and your own path forward? So I think just remembering that is incredibly important. And it's something that I've had to learn over the past 2 years of being in this position.
Amazing. Amazing. That's such a good point. I haven't really thought about that either. Like there is such a inherent cultural like similarity in Marines working together, but then when you jump out in the civilian world, unless if everybody came from the same company or like had some sort of shared background, you're right. Like you have to adapt people. You have to get people to adapt into your culture. So that's a great point, and a good piece of wisdom for guys and gals getting out. Speaking of that, do you have any advice for people who might be thinking about getting out of the military, or who have just gotten out over the last couple of years? You got any advice for them, Tyler?
Enjoy the journey, right? We're constantly driven to solve hard problems in the military, right? You have an opportunity. For me, I call it chapter 2. That's like my internal dialogue with myself. Like this is chapter 2. And my whole goal has been to take the things I did really well on chapter 1, take those over, apply those, right? What are the things that if I had to redo, I could go back and redo and make sure I apply those to chapter 2. I would kind of set that out. And, I've heard this come from a few colleagues of mine and like groups that I'm in. Dream big, right? Like anything is possible, right? If you are willing to work for it and you are really to put the time in, to earn it, it's possible. So, I mean, I didn't think if you would have asked me on my on my retirement date, if I would have built a 0 to 12 person company that's solving incredibly challenging problems for the government right now, I probably would have laughed at you, right? I had honestly no intention of doing that. I think everything happens for a reason. We're blessed to have a chapter 2. Really sit and marinate on that for a minute. Sometimes maybe, you get lucky and find it in your internship. I mean, I didn't, but maybe you do, and good for you. And I hope that works. Maybe it takes you an internship and a couple jobs. Like that's okay. The bottom line is once you get to your final destination, the path in which you embarked on is the one that got you there. As hard as it can be sometimes, enjoy the ride.
Great advice. Definitely great advice. The ride, kind of, makes the ending in some ways, or it makes the final chapter. So that's awesome. All right. Anything else? Any like parting comments or anything else that you want to share with the listeners? How do they find you and connect with you if they want to learn more about Kognitiv Edge? Anything like that?
Yeah, one thing I would share with the community is if one of us had all the answers, right, we would just give it to one another. That'd be just super easy, right? Like if I had the answers, I could just do podcast all day and then I could give everybody the answer, right? And I wish nothing more. Like I would trade everything to be able to do that, right? Because that'd be helpful to everybody. This is not only your journeys, it's your family's journeys, right? And you've got mentors and advisors and brilliant podcasts like this, right? Use it to your advantage. It's a tool, right? And one thing that I've made a very dedicated effort to this year is sending the elevator back down. There is no way right now I would be where I'm at doing what I am without mentorship from peers, junior Marines, senior Marines. Absolutely no way. I still, have leveraged them in some capacity during the transition. Then the commercial space, people are infatuated with the life that we were blessed to live and want nothing more to help and enable that on chapter 2. I've leveraged a ton of people on the commercial side that I've taken little tidbits and nuggets from and applied. I listened to a lot of podcasts on various people sharing their stories. And I think what happens is you kind of have like deep down, you kind of know what you want to do, but you're unsure, right? But taking in from your network, right? From who you served with to adjacent people you served with to podcast to transition programs. If you're able to take all that information, it's a lot at first, and just kind of distill that down to maybe you just need this piece for right now. And then as you continue on the journey, you need another piece later. Just be mindful of that. And one thing that I'm actively doing, are those that have found something that they like on the other side, pass that back down, right? Take the phone call, answer the email, do the podcast, because I'm not sure if it's helpful, but I'm sure I'm sure not going to be the person who didn't try. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. And I would ask the community to do the same thing, because I think we have a ton of good information that can help one another out.
Amazing, Tyler. You're the man. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and best of luck to you and Kognitiv Edge going forward.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you. Thank you to our guest for sharing their journey from the military to corporate leadership. We'll be back soon with more stories of veterans proving that success doesn't end with a uniform. It begins a new mission. This is Military to Management with your host, Eamon.